threat.
No public programs to use our talent and energies. We're told only to wait, quietly, if we don't mind.
But we're not waiting anymore.
And it starts
with the Youth Climate Corps.
It's time for a brash and transformative new public program.
One that puts thousands of young people to work, reducing greenhouse gas emissions and strengthening communities.
Building new renewable energy projects.
Protecting biodiversity.
Retrofitting our buildings
so we can live in dignity and safety and take care of each other as we face the unprecedented.
We deserve nothing less than good green work.
A living wage.
And access to union representation.
A program that places Indigenous knowledge and self-determination at its heart.
A program that invests in equity
and making the future of work one in which we can all see ourselves.
A program that provides a pathway to continuing education and a career confronting the climate crisis. And a program that can say to every person under 35,
if you understand that we face a climate emergency
and you want to meet this generational challenge now, then we have a place for you.
No one will be turned away because we've tried our hand at making history.
Now we're ready to defend our future.
How will we win?
Organize.
Advocate.
Vote.
Join the movement for a Youth Climate Corps
at climateemergencyunit.ca/climatecorps.
Yay! Oh my gosh, that is an electrifying message. Wow. Welcome to everyone who came in while we were playing the video. That was the world premiere of a video about the Youth Climate Corps, carrying this really inspiring message of what this program could be in its fullest form. So welcome. My name is Anjali Appadurai. I am your host for today's call. I am one of the team members at the Climate Emergency Unit. Been working with this incredible, small but effective team, working on a number of campaigns. The Youth Climate Corps is one of those campaigns, and the one that is feeling the most exciting and electrifying right now. So that video that you just saw was produced by the Edmonton-based production company, Sticks and Stones, so shout out to them. And we'll be sharing a link to that video later so you can rewatch it to your heart's content and share it widely, please. I think it needs to be seen by a lot more folks. So I would like to acknowledge that I'm calling in today from the unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And that is, these are the lands that I call home. I was not born here. I'm an immigrant settler on these lands, and I make it part of my practice of climate justice to weave in that understanding and deepen that understanding for myself in all of my work, recognizing that this emergency that we're in, the climate emergency, goes back far, far longer than most of us talk about. It goes back right to the days of colonization, and these lands have been in a state of emergency since then. And so incorporating that into our work is important and paramount at all times. And so I invite everyone here in this meeting to introduce yourself in the chat and also include the territory that you're calling in from. And if you don't know the territory that you're calling in from, you can go to this website that my teammate Emiko just put in the chat. It's native-land.ca, and you can look up where you're calling in from. And we'd love to see who's here and where you're located. This is a national call, so we actually have folks on this call from across the country, which is really exciting. So why are we here today? This is a very exciting occasion, and I hope this will be the beginning of a very hopeful, imaginative, and truly transformative campaign to instate a national youth climate corps to usher us through the big societal transition ahead. A couple housekeeping notes. We are recording this event. You'll see that we're already recording. So if you would like to have your camera on, we would love that. We invite that, but just keep in mind that it is being recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, please have your camera off. We have 3 incredible panelists with us today that we're going to hear from very shortly. And there will be an opportunity to ask them questions. So to ask the panelists questions, please use the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. If you can't find that Q&A box, put a message in the chat and one of our team members will help you with that. But you can put in your questions throughout this call, and we will get to as many as we have time for at the end of the panel. All right, so what are we going to do in the next hour and a bit? We have a pretty packed call for you. It's going to be really energizing and exciting. So first, we have the panel discussion with our three incredible panelists. Then we're going to hear from my teammate Seth, and he's going to give you a very galvanizing set of actions that you can actually take right after this call. Then we're going to have the opportunity to chat with each other in regional breakouts where we can actually meet folks on the call who are from your region and discuss, what your potential role could be in this exciting campaign. And then we get another exclusive new video. And this is a song from the Fugitives. We're thrilled to premiere a new climate song from Juno Award nominated folk roots band, the Fugitives. And they wrote a very beautiful, heartfelt song with an adorable video. And they're letting us publicly premiere their song with you this evening. So you'll be the first to hear this song before it's released. We hope that you love it as much as we do. I actually think we have some bandmates from the Fugitives on the call tonight. So thank you so much for being here. All right, so before the panel comes, I want to kick off the event by offering you an overview of our vision for the Youth Climate Corps. It's a vision that I hope many of you share, and it's a vision that I hope will be shaped by all of us as we build power towards a win for this campaign. Firstly, right off the bat, I want to dispel the notion that we, the Climate Emergency Unit, are going to create the Youth Climate Corps or lead it in any way. That's not true. We don't want to lead the YCC. That's not the spirit of it. We at the CEU are a convener, we're a holder of space, we are a creator of containers for the collective power of the climate movement to build and grow and push our political decision makers into a new era, a climate safe future. And we're here to facilitate that collective power wherever we can, but we're only going to be around till 2025. The Climate Emergency Unit will be closing its doors in 3 years by design. And so then the spirit of the Youth Climate Corps is much bigger than us. So to be clear, we are not trying to kickstart a new nonprofit youth program here. That is too small. The climate emergency is all about speed and scale, and initiatives like the Youth Climate Corps need to be state-led. We have plenty of student and youth programs across the country that provide placements for a few dozen or a few hundred youth a year, and those are awesome, mostly in 4-month summer jobs or volunteer internships. Meeting the climate emergency requires something much more grand. We are envisioning a government program that turns no one away, and for which the only requirement for entry is the desire to sign on. But we see local governments and communities guiding which projects are supported and how the funding and youth are deployed to ensure that the work maximizes GHG emissions reductions and aligns with local climate plans. So the Youth Climate Corps, as we envision it, would be a 2-year federally funded training and employment program for people 35 and under, empowering them to work within their communities and across the country on low carbon and climate mitigation and adaptation work. YCC participants would be engaged in meaningful climate work, like restoring ecosystems, managing forests to reduce wildfire risks, responding to climate disasters, and enhancing community resilience and safety, building new climate infrastructure like renewable energy projects and building retrofits and high-speed rail, and engaging in low carbon care work like elder and child care, because that's climate work too. And for 2 years, these young people would be well paid as they get trained up in vital work that may set them on a new life and career course. So our job is to hold this vision and to build power towards it. We have to not only push decision makers with the sheer force of our movement and our advocacy, but we also have to help them widen the horizons of their imaginations. We have to help our decision makers get excited about the potential of a national youth climate corps. And so at a time when many communities are grappling with the future prospects for their youth, and when many young people are wrestling with climate anxiety and mental health, the YCC could just be the hopeful solution to captivate people's excitement and to signal that young people are being invited to join in a grand societal and economic transformation. One last point before we get to our panel. Some of you might be a little confused about all these different initiatives and groups using the Climate Corps name. And so I just want to clarify what those are. There are a bunch of initiatives out there and they are distinct, but we're all collaborating. So you have the Alberta Climate Corps campaign pushing for a provincial program in that province. Then you've got the BC Youth Climate Corps group pushing the BC government to adopt a provincial YCC here in BC, here where I am. But also in collaboration with WildSite in the Kootenays, they're also providing a proof of concept of this idea. So they're piloting small youth climate corps projects in various communities around BC and showing what this could actually look like on a community level. And then you have us at the Climate Emergency Unit collaborating with Small Change Fund and others trying to build a national campaign for a federal youth climate corps. So there you go. We're all supporting each other. We're pulling in a similar direction, but with some different political targets. The panel is going to make all of this a bit clearer because the panel is made up of folks who are working on these different efforts, sharing what they're up to. So I hope that was a clarifying overview of what the Youth Climate Corps actually is and the scale that we actually need it to be for it to achieve its final form. All right, so without further ado, I'm very excited to bring on our panelists. I have the utmost admiration for all three folks on this call. I'm so thrilled that we got all of them. So first up, I would like to introduce someone who barely needs an introduction. Our first panelist is Naomi Klein. She's someone I have looked up to for over a decade now. She's someone who has spent time in every corner of the climate movement, investigating, researching, writing, and working in solidarity with grassroots efforts around the world. She is an author, she is a teacher, she's a professor, she is an inspiration, she's an activist, and she has some words of wisdom to share with us today. So thank you so much, Naomi, for being here.
Thrilled to be with you, Anjali, on this very exciting afternoon, evening, and with you from unceded Shishut territory on the Sunshine Coast.
Thank you. And our second panelist is Juan Vargas. Juan is the Climate Emergency Unit's prairie organizer. He is based in Edmonton on Treaty 6 territory. Born in Colombia, multiracial and cross-border perspectives deeply inform Juan's work, having completed research capstones on environmental peace building and energy transitions in South America. When he isn't thinking about birds, Juan tries to listen to one new album a day in case you have any recommendations. I actually didn't know that about you, Juan, until this bio. So Juan is also my hardworking, inspirational, and deeply hilarious teammate. So thank you, Juan, for doing all this work to bring us to this point.
Thanks, Anjali. It's great to be here. And yeah, I'm always looking for like album recommendations. It was my New Year's resolution, so we're trying to stay true to it.
Awesome. And last but not least, we have Kate Watt. Kate Watt grew up in the East Kootenays on the unceded lands of the Siniks, Tunaka, and Salix people. Now she is currently a student at the University of British Columbia, and Kate comes to this panel discussion as someone who has worked in the Youth Climate Corps and now serves on the BC Youth Climate Corps Board of Directors. When she's not studying, Kate enjoys reading, writing, hiking, and spending time outdoors with her friends and family. Welcome, Kate. Thank you so much for being here.
Much as well. I'm really excited.
All right. So before we kick off the panel, I just want to remind folks that we are open to questions from all of you. So if you have a question, please use the Q&A function that you'll find at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to cover what we can. All right. Here's our panel, everyone. I'm so excited to dive in with all of you, and I just want to let all of you know that I have questions for each of you, but if you would like to respond to anything that any of you says, feel free to do that. It's a pretty informal atmosphere. Feel free to jump in whenever you want. And with that, I would like to ask Naomi a question first. So Naomi has a special perspective on this. And so Naomi, so all of these but climate core efforts here in Canada and down south in the Sunrise Movement, where they are running an effort to win a civilian climate core in the US, they all have their historic root in a program from the 1930s in the US, the Civilian Conservation Corps. And you've dug into this and researched this, Naomi. And so could you tell us about the historic origins of the Climate Corps program? Or the Conservation Corps program, rather.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I should say that, I started digging into this, I don't know, probably around 5 years ago, 6 years ago, in part because when I would talk about the kind of systemic change, really transformational action that we need in the face of the climate crisis, a lot of the pushback that I would hear was just, it's too big, it's too much, we could never do this, right? And so it was really useful to kind of dig into that New Deal history in the 1930s to say, well, actually, there was a period when the US, pretty conservative country, doesn't like big government, faced a few very large scale crises at once and responded with the kind of speed and scale that is required. Now, a lot of what happened during the New Deal with the sometimes referred to as the alphabet soup set of programs that FDR launched, and I have a fire here in the background, not just because I'm doing an FDR fireside chat, but because we lost power here, or I have any heat. So a lot of the New Deal programs actually were pretty lousy for the environment, mega dams and fossil fuel infrastructure. But the CCC, as you mentioned, Anjali, is often held up as this program that they were referred to sometimes as the FDR's tree army. So just to give a sense of the scale, okay, this was a program designed to address a few problems at once. One, youth unemployment. And poverty, really, because the people who participated in the CCC, the young people their families had to be on relief, meaning they were receiving some kind of government assistance. So it was an anti-poverty program, and the young people who participated in it were overwhelmingly malnourished. They were in dire straits, right? And the other crisis that the U.S. was facing was the Dust Bowl. People often forget that the Great Depression was also a period of ecological crisis in the U.S. They had also overlogged their forests, so they didn't have enough timber. So the CCC, the men of the CCC, as they were called, there were 3 million young men who participated in the program over the course of the decade. And they planted 2 billion trees, which at the time was half the number of trees that had ever been planted in the United States. So that's the scale. If you've ever been in a US state park or national park, chances are you have experienced CCC infrastructure, because the other piece of it, of the program, was the idea that people have a right to nature, and not only rich people. And so a big part of it had to do with access to nature. And building that infrastructure that allowed people to access it. So hundreds of state park infrastructure was built, but we know that this was also a kind of a vision of conservation that was colonial, that displaced many Indigenous people. There were CCC camps, as they were called, in Indigenous communities. But it was also a segregated program. As I said, it was the men of the CCC. Eleanor Roosevelt managed to get one camp for women where they learned canning and other sort of home ec skills. But just coming back to your question, you said that the roots of what you're proposing here with this new Youth Climate Corps are in the CCC. I would say it's a hybrid of the CCC and another New Deal program, which was the National Youth Administration, the NYA, which actually employed more young people than the CCC. It was more integrated, it had greater gender balance, it was more urban. It employed 4.5 million young people to do things like you said, care work, to train nursing aides, to build new schools, and really to do a huge amount of skills training. So yeah, the scale of this of what we're referencing is just incredible. More than 7 million young people were employed through the NYA and the CCC combined.
That's really cool. I didn't know about the second program. So we're drawing from history here. And Naomi, I have so many questions for you, including wanting to dig into, what we could improve on from those programs. And you did mention a little bit of, with the CCC, it being rooted in a notion of conservationism that was deeply colonial. But I actually want to skip to another question for you.
Well, I mean, just come back to what they did wrong. There's a couple.
Yes, yeah, okay, yes, please. You can do that.
I think the sense of scale and the sense of urgency is something that we could learn from. But these, the CCC was incredibly centralized. It was run by the military. I don't think we want that. And if this were to happen in Canada, and it absolutely should, it needs to be rooted in principles of environmental justice and climate justice. It can't be centralized. It can't be Ottawa saying, this is going to happen here or there. It has, and this is, I think, in the plans that you've outlined, that communities have to determine what their needs are. The other thing about the CCC model, unlike the NYA, is that the whole thing was kind of shipping people out of their communities, and there's really no need for that. There's no reason for young people to have to leave their communities if they don't want to, right? And so those are a couple of things that I think we need to learn from right away.
And well, now that we're there, just digging into it a bit more, I think there are a lot of critiques. That was a long time ago. Is there anything else that we could improve on for a contemporary youth climate corps that's federally run, but designed by communities?
Well, if we're talking about, so much of this is about land. It's about land rehabilitation. It's about healing the land. As we heal ourselves, as we heal our relationships, and I think that this should be Indigenous led to the greatest extent possible. One of the interesting things about the CCC is, I love looking back at these old photographs, but they had libraries, they had hundreds of camps across the US, so CCC camps, and they didn't, I think they were kind of, frankly, there's a great book called Nature's New Deal by Neil Marr, who's a professor of history at Rutgers University. Anybody who's interested in this should really read Nature's New Deal. But there have been a few books that have looked at the CCC and the gender dynamics at play. There was actually a lot of nervousness about sending all of these young men into the woods. I think there was quite a bit of homophobia and fear that they might turn gay, and they had to sort of think of activities for them to do at night. And one of the things that they did was they had these libraries where they educated these sort of urban kids about conservation and ecology. So that's interesting, but rather than thinking about libraries in the woods, I think we should be thinking about these programs as opportunities for a real worldview shift, a paradigm shift. And traditional Indigenous knowledge should be at the center of that. And all of this should be done in the spirit of repairing our relationship. So those are a few sort of general principles of how we can do things a lot better. I think the main thing that we should be taking from looking back at this moment is just the kind of resources devoted to it, the kind of economic commitment, the idea that we can solve multiple crises at once. Another piece of this that I think is worth thinking about is that we have a climate crisis, we have a cost of living crisis, we have an inequality and injustice crisis, but we also have a mental health crisis among young people. And this was, something that I do take inspiration from when I look back at this period was, when you listen to Eleanor Roosevelt talk about it, or FDR to a lesser extent, they talk about when they talk about the depression, when we talk about it now, we think about it as just a term to describe an economic collapse. But they were talking about depression as a mental health crisis in today's language, that it wasn't just the economy that was depressed, that young people were depressed as well. And they were worried about losing a generation to despair and hopelessness. And so taking mental health that seriously, to think about, what do young people need? Sense of mission, a sense of purpose, each other's company. There's so much opportunity there and so much richness.
That is a lot to, there's so much history there to draw from, and there's so much potential in what you just said, Naomi. I can't wait to dig into that a little more. I want to direct a couple questions at the other panelists, and then come back to questions for the whole panel. So Juan, you've got an active campaign going on in Alberta, and you're trying to convince the provincial government to adopt this idea. And you're building pressure to make the climate core a policy worth fighting for in your upcoming election. Your vision is a bit less youth focused. Tell us about the Alberta campaign. How's it going and what's it all about?
Thanks, Anjali. The Alberta campaign is going incredible. Every day I kind of wake up and I can't believe that I get to do this. I had the pleasure to be in Lethbridge, which is in southwest Alberta this weekend. And Lethbridge was an interesting place, an evolving place over the last few years, in part largely because it was a place where we saw a really big shift in the conversations that people were having around the environment, around energy transition, but more specifically around coal mining in the Rockies. So I don't know how many of you kind of paid attention to that fight, but there was a really big push against a delisting of land in the eastern slopes of the Rockies by the Alberta government to make it allowable to do mountaintop removal, to do large-scale strip mining for coal, of all things, in Lethbridge, in the Crow's Nest Pass, within that area, right? Not necessarily Lethbridge, but really in that corner of the province. And what we saw was that it wasn't just people in Lethbridge, but it was people all across the province really mobilizing against that decision, right? Obviously, there is always going to be outliers, but what we really saw was that there was a large shift, and there is a large shift happening within Alberta, not just when it comes to coal, but also when it comes to oil and gas, also when it comes to the energy transition overall. So what we're really seeing, Alberta, is that less and less people are scared of an energy transition. More and more people want to do something about climate change, but they get almost nothing from any of the major parties within the province. So that, coupled with a lot of what Naomi's talking about mental illness and mental health, when it comes to people feeling like there's no meaningful promise for the future, is really what led to wanting to focus so much on the climate core demand in Alberta. And that's work that I've been doing for almost a year now. And it was almost kickstarted by student leaders who were saying exactly that they wanted to give something to their constituents for them to fight for, but that it wasn't really clear what it was, because it was tough to take a stand as a student leader without immediately getting kind of that kickback, that blowback of people saying, well, you just hate oil and gas, well, you just hate the energy industry, well, you just hate us. We tell them, no, we have a positive campaign for you, we have a positive vision for you, and it's a vision that you can truly be a part of. And so in that last year, the kind of evolution that we've seen from across the province is that people want to be a part of something that is positive and of something that responds to these large anxieties that we have. And you're right, we have changed the demands a little bit on what it is. We're not specifically calling for a youth climate core. And that has come out of some of these really large conversations that we've had around, well, there's this huge shift happening. What can we win? right? Because there's this huge shift happening, and we have people who want to make these really big demands, but where things are right now, there really isn't that many parties willing to listen to us yet, right? So we have to build power, we have to build numbers, and we have to build the amount of people that are ready to push on the UCP, on the NDP, on the Alberta Party, on the Greens, to really fight for these issues. But if we're gonna win, we have to make a big demand, knowing that they're probably gonna whittle it down. And if they do whittle it down, and we have the power to fight to win it, then we're gonna get real mad at them. And we're gonna use the power that we gain in order to push back against them. So we're growing, we're growing, we're growing. I can't wait to get into my breakout group with my Alberta people in a bit to really talk to them about the plan. But we have 3 months to really bring this to a really large level. And it's really resonating with people. And the other thing that I had on my notes is that one of the things that people really see in Alberta when we talk about the Climate Corps is that they can understand the aspect of it that speaks to investing and protecting public institutions. And that isn't just protecting the public institutions that are healthcare and long-term care and childcare, but it also speaks to people are ready to be given a promise of something like large-scale crown corporations and government investment. And very specifically there, I was speaking about a vision for increasing rural Wi-Fi and internet access with some folks who live in rural Alberta. And their response was, this is great. It would be great for a Climate Corps to do this because we're tired of waiting for TELUS to do it. We're tired of waiting for Shaw to do it. We're tired of waiting for Rogers to do it. We just need to do it. And so people see the vision and people see the immediate tie-in to protecting our public institutions.
I love that we're talking about this bold, imaginative, forward-looking thing, but we're also talking about defending the public while we do it, and building up a stronger public sphere while we do that. Juan, I just want to pivot back to the federal campaign, which you're also working on. And you've been talking to a lot of people about this concept, the big federal YCC program. I think a lot of us on this call are wondering what makes a YCC winnable?
I think in one word, it's positive. Like we've spent so much of the last 10 years fighting against every single decision that was brought down. We spent, that time fighting against Kinder Morgan, and then we spent it against Trans Mountain. And that doesn't mean those fights stop, right? We need to keep pushing for those. We need to keep standing in solidarity with the nations who are stopping those projects from going through. But very specifically, what a Climate Corps does is that it starts to really create the vision of what the country can look like, of how we can shift to something new. And specifically here in Alberta, relating to the rest of the country, is that we can show people that we can start making those shifts in what jobs look like, and what industries look like, and in what those public institutions look like. And then the other side of that too is people before the pandemic started were familiar with the idea of the Green New Deal, and the Green New Deal was starting to resonate with people. And something that the Climate Corps demand, or that the Youth Climate Corps demand really picks up, is on that key aspect of the Green New Deal, which is we need large scale programs that invest in people, that don't just think about profit first, and that think about the environment. And so there's this really incredible twinning of this kind of place where we were going with the demand for a Green New Deal, and a real imaginable program that people want to see created and that people want us to invest in.
Love that. Thank you, Juan. And I want to move over to Kate. So Kate, you are an alumnus of a local BC Youth Climate Corps program. I'm so curious about what that program was like. So if you could please tell us what that program was like and how many were in your cohort and how long the program was and what did you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I get really excited talking about this because I think the Youth Climate Corps is still kind of an abstract idea to some people, but the fact that it has been done and can be done is really exciting. So yeah, to answer your question, I did the program, the BC Youth Climate Corps program, back in the fall of 2021, and that was in the West Kootenays. And I did that with just 3 other people, so it was a small group of us. It lasted 3 months. It felt like much longer because we tackled so much during that time. But yeah, in terms of what we actually did, I would say that there were two main areas we focused on, and that was wildfire risk management and food security. And we chose those two areas based on the needs of the community in which we were working. So to go into the specifics a little more, with wildfire risk management, we were working in a forest outside the community of Nelson, trying to reduce the density of fuel in the forest because there's a long history of fire suppression in that area, and the more fuel that accumulates, the higher the risk of wildfire becomes. So yeah, our cohort partnered with a local forestry and wildfire management business. They provided us with training, and it was just, yeah, an overall really, really great relationship we had with them. And then, yeah, we worked to reduce the density of fuel in the forest. And we did that for the first month of the program. And that part I particularly really enjoyed and found very meaningful because it was like objectively really important work. The community of Nelson is at a really high risk of experiencing a severe wildfire. So the work we were doing had a very tangible and important impact. And I guess personally, I found that aspect of the program to be really, yeah, just it helped me a lot personally because it gave me skills that I then used to get future jobs. I worked with the BC Wildfire Service following summer, and that wouldn't have been possible without the training I got with the Youth Climate Corps. And then the other major project we worked on combined sustainable agriculture and wildfire risk management. And it's a little complicated to explain what the project was, but I'll try my best. So I forget whose idea it was specifically. I wish I remembered because it's a brilliant idea. But the idea was to basically create a garden in a fire break. And that maybe doesn't sound super exciting, but let me tell you why it is, because I think it's really cool. So a fire break is an area of strategically cleared forest. Usually it's outside of a community, so fire cannot spread into that community. And what happens with fire breaks is the province or whoever's maintaining that fire break sends crews back every 5 to 10 years to clear out the vegetation that's accumulated over that time period. Yeah, so.
How old were you when you entered the cohort? We just had an audience member ask that.
Oh, I was 21. I am 23 as of today.
Cool.
Yeah.
I also want to ask you, so you went from that cohort program to then participating in the BC Youth Climate Corps campaign, trying to push the BC government, right, to bring in the program at a much larger province-wide scale. So can you tell us a bit about how that's going and what that experience has been like and how it's being received by folks in government?
Yeah, definitely. I'll be a little bit brief on this topic since that area is more the expertise of Ben and Seth, who will definitely fill in the details a lot more later on. But yeah, I guess for now, I'll say that the BC Youth Climate Corps has been working, I think, really closely over the last year or so with ministers and staff, just people at the provincial, federal, and municipal levels of government. Personally, I was in a meeting last year with Minister of Climate Change and Environment, George Heyman. That went really well. And yeah, since then, we've just continuously been raising awareness. But there is still quite a bit more work to do, and we've noticed the enthusiasm.
What are some of the ways in which you've been bringing this to the attention of decision makers or applying pressure to decision makers? You mentioned that you've been having meetings, which is great.
Yeah, meetings. Yeah, to be honest, it's mostly been other people in the organization who have been doing that. I'm a full-time student, so I don't have a whole lot of time to give, but yeah, personally, I've been helping with primarily meetings. Yeah.
And also, am I mistaken that it is Kate's birthday today?
It's my birthday.
Is your birthday today?
Yes.
Happy birthday! Everybody send her a happy birthday beam. I hope you felt that. Thanks for telling us about that, Kate. That is really like practical, on the ground experience of what we're trying to here at a much larger scale, which is really cool to bring it back down to earth like that. So I want to open it back up to the panel, and once again, feel free to jump in and discuss with each other. But you know, we are at a stage in the climate emergency where there are so many impacts, both extreme and visible, and silent and insidious, happening around us. And we know that right now there are so many young people wrestling with climate anxiety, you know, a phenomenon that I don't even remember growing up in my generation. But now, you know, when I meet high schoolers or kids younger than that, you know, they have eco anxiety, and that is a term that is, you know, colloquial and well known, and a lot of people have it, which is so concerning. And this emergency that we're in is clearly impacting their mental health. A new report from Lakehead University researchers Lindsay Galloway and Ellen Field, called Climate Emotions and Anxiety Among Young People in Canada, surveyed 1,000 young people aged 16 to 24. And among their findings were that at least 56% afraid, sad, anxious, and powerless, and 78% reported that climate change impacts their overall mental health. The respondents also rated government responses to climate change negatively, and they reported greater feelings of betrayal than of reassurance, which is really interesting. I won't speak to it. I'll let you speak to it. So I would love for the panel to discuss this. Given that data backing up what we see all around us, how do you think a YCC could help with that? And maybe we'll start with Naomi. We'll go in the same order, but you know, feel free to jump off each other.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think and it was so interesting listening to Kate and Juan's perspectives on this. So, you know, I always bristle a little bit at the sort of framing around climate anxiety, because I think it kind of predetermines. I think young people have a lot of feelings, and they're and some, you know, someone said in the chat, it's not only young people who have these feelings. And it's not only, you know, and the truth is what we know, you know, here in BC, but in many other contexts as well, that elders are the most at risk from climate disasters, right? During the heat dome, it was overwhelmingly older people, particularly older people who had a range of pre-existing medical conditions and disabilities that made them much more likely to be among the more than 600 people who died in the deadliest weather event in Canadian history. And, you know, this is true during wildfires, this is true during floods. So I think we should be inclusive about this, but in terms of that anxiety, rage, despair, you know, I hear a lot about it from my students at UBC. I'm currently teaching a course that's being co-teaching a course that's being offered for the first time at UBC on the climate emergency, and the despair. And I see despair much more than I see anxiety, and it disturbs me more. I mean, I think being anxious is an entirely rational way to feel in the face of what we know about the climate crisis. It's the despair, it's the sort of kind of like the deadening down of a sense of possibility that as an activist and an organizer and an educator, I'm much more fearful about. And that has to do with, frankly, having tried really hard. Like the people who I'm teaching who are in second and third year are people who marched in high school in climate strikes. You know, they're people who volunteered in your campaign, Anjali, you know, and they feel like every time they have worked and mobilized and put their hearts into something, they've been smashed down and they don't see anything on the scale of the crisis, right? So, you know, picking up on what Juan said about, you know, just the fact that it is positive, it's positive and it's big, right? Signals something. Like, none of us are saying this is the solution to the climate crisis, but in terms of tipping into, like, from despair into a sense of possibility, I think it really does hold a key. And I think it is, you know, it's the beginning of a sense of large scale transformational action. And, you know, to pick up a little bit on what Juan was saying about this being something that is sort of sellable in a place like Lethbridge, right? This was also true of the CCC. I just want to say, it's one of the really interesting little historical details is that if you map where FDR set up a lot of these camps, they were in areas that voted against him in 1932, the first time he ran for president. And then if you look at a map of who voted for him in 1936, when he won a much larger mandate for a second term, a lot of those areas flipped. So they were, you know, Republican areas that flipped because they had seen the benefit. So it wasn't like an ideological argument about it. This is benefiting my community, right? It is bringing services to my community. It's improving daily life in my community. And so, you know, I think this is an opportunity to get us out of this sort of partisan gridlock a little bit on these issues, where, because we're not going to win this at a national level in terms of the ideological debate, but at the community level, when it's like, this is employing young people, this is improving things, see it, right? It's getting solar panels in our school, whatever it is, it's electrifying the school buses. That is the kind of thing that changes minds.
And I just, I think I'll tack on to that question, you know, and you've been speaking to it, Naomi, is I want to know from the three of you what excites you the most about a federal youth climate corps. And Naomi, I think you've just named a few things that are really exciting, but in your words, what do you think excites you most about this?
Is that for me?
Yeah, just to follow up, and then I want to hear the same thing from Juan and Kate as well.
I think it's simply, I think it holds a key to rekindling that sense of possibility that I think we felt in 2019 when the streets were flooded with young people. It's not going to be a march that's going to reawaken us again. It's going to be actually getting some stuff done, right? I think that there's a sense of, oh, if we could just have another action. No. I think that the time of sort of symbolic sort of protest, it's not that we don't need it, but that's not going to be what really opens up a sense of possibility and hope again. And so that's what I'm most excited about. And just, you know what, I think this is the last time I'm going to talk. So one point I just wanted to make is that I hope you, in your campaigning and in your strategizing, use universities, lobby universities to lobby the federal government, because, you know, we owe it to our students to fight for a future for them. And fighting for a program like this, I think, is something that public universities should be doing for their students who don't, you know, so many students come to me and say, you know, I don't know what to do. I have been taking these courses and I want to work in a way that feels like is mission driven, that feels like it is a solution, but I'm getting offered this job from a bank or and what should I do? And I'm in this position of like, I don't want to tell them not to take a job that they need. They've got debt and there aren't alternatives. So we need to be fighting for those alternatives as institutions. And I think public universities could be a really powerful lever in this.
Wow. I love that so much, Naomi. I want to ask the same thing of Juan and then Kate, you know, linking this sort of growing anxiety, but Naomi sort of pulled that concept apart, but you know, the results of this study and linking that to what makes a YCC exciting to you.
Yeah, I'll hit back with another study, and this was a survey that was held by the University of Alberta Students' Union about 2 years ago, where they were asking students whether they were planning to stay in Alberta after they graduated their undergrad or whether they wanted to leave. 50% of students either wanted to leave or were on the fence about leaving. And you're all seeing the outcomes of that, right? Like if you're in the Toronto metro system or if you're in Vancouver, you're seeing Alberta is calling posters everywhere because we keep scaring away young people, right? There's that, but there's also the fact that this promise that I grew up with, that people before me grew up with, of you don't even have to go to university, just go, there's a job waiting for you in the oil patch, doesn't exist anymore. And where it does exist, people don't buy it. People don't believe it, right? They know that the jobs are going away. They know that where the jobs are, they're being automated. And to tack on top of that, people don't want to be part of that as much anymore, right? They know that it's sunsetting, and they are still terrified of climate change in whatever Alberta version of terrified of climate change looks like, right? And that runs the whole scale. And so what the Climate Corps does is it tells them, here's the invitation, like here's your role to be a part of something. So yes, it's big, yes, it's imaginable. And just like Naomi said, it sends this really big signal of we're changing how we're thinking about this. We're changing how we're thinking about public institutions. I think Albertans are super ready for that call. I think people across the country are super ready for that call. And the other two things that I was going to mention, I did a lot of like preliminary meetings when I was like really thinking about like, well, how do we build like a good framing, a good campaign that makes sense to people? And I got the chance to actually meet with some people who have been running conservation corps or climate corps in the state. And I met with someone from Montana, from the Montana Conservation Corps, and his reasoning for why conservatives, Republicans in Montana love the Climate Corps is because you get young people to the job when the military doesn't want to do it, and you get young people to stick around for longer when there's emergencies. And we know that this is exactly the problem that we're going to have in Canada, like across the country. The Canadian military no longer wants to be on the hook for responding to emergencies. And if they stop doing that work, then we have no one to do it, right? Clear opportunity for a youth climate corps. But the other side of it is that even with the most reluctant communities who saw civilian conservation corps, youth conservation corps, youth climate corps across the states going into their communities, on day one, they were saying, we hate this. We don't trust these youth with their piercings, with their tattoos, with their colored hair. 3 months later, they loved them, right? Like they had a real bond. And you see real, in the States, bipartisan support where it hasn't been politicized to this large degree across the country, right? Whether it's in California, Montana, New York, I could name all 50 states, I'm not gonna. And so I think we can really see that here too. And I think that not only means that people are being signaled that something big is coming their way, that things are shifting positively, but also that they can stay in their communities, they can make a big impact. And it will also have a really big impact on me because I'm really tired of my friends leaving Alberta and I want them to stay.
Love that, Juan. And for Kate, you know, having been a young person who was given the opportunity to go boots on the ground in a YCC initiative, how did you see that impacting the mental health of your peers?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I guess I'll start by going back to what Naomi said about the feeling of despair being so much more noticeable than the feeling of anxiety. And personally, oh my gosh, I can relate to that so much. Like I think back to the summer of 2021. And that was when I actually called a counselor for the first time to talk about my feelings regarding climate change. And just for context, that was after the heat dome when the thermometer on our house read 45 degrees and we couldn't go outside. And I was just so worried about wildfires because, you know, where I'm from, it's so prone to wildfire. So anyhow, I called someone to talk about it because I just felt this overwhelming feeling of despair and fear. And she asked, why are you feeling that way? And I thought about it and still think about it a lot. And I guess it comes back to just feeling powerless in a lot of ways. And like whatever I do won't matter. But then, yeah, actually just a couple months after that is when I participated in the Youth Climate Corps. And I still felt those feelings to some degree, but they were really kind of pushed to the side because being in the Youth Climate Corps, I was actually able to do boots on the ground work and work alongside people who are feeling the same things as me. And it felt so fulfilling. And like both Juan and Naomi have said, it's an organization that really pushes for something, not against something. And I think, yeah, it felt like I was working towards the future that I wanted to see, and that I was consciously trying to build that. And that felt very, very empowering.
And as you continue to work on the provincial campaign in BC, what's most exciting to you about that?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess having done the Youth Climate Corps myself, I am really glad that other people are going to be able to experience that. But yeah, I think one of the things I really appreciate about the Youth Climate Corps the most is that it does meet the very specific needs of each community. So as it expands, yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens in each community. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love that continuum of you actually doing it on the ground, and then now you're fighting for it at a provincial level. Yeah, building something as an antidote to despair. It's a very powerful idea. And doing something positive after, often years of sort of negative climate activism, fighting against. Thank you so much to the panel. That was just, heartfelt and genuine and soulful and informative. So thank you so much to each and every one of you. And those of us in the audience, send our appreciation through the chat to our panelists. Naomi says also it's winnable. Yes, that's a great segue. Naomi, we're going to hear exactly how winnable this campaign is, but there's one more video that we have for you before we get into that. We are now going to hear from Sas Umbas, who's a matriarch of the Mamtagila Nation from Northern Vancouver Island, who is partnering on the BC Youth BC Youth Climate Corps program in Kawakwa territories. It's a 2-minute video, and it gives you a sense of what an Indigenous-led YCC program can do. So once again, thank you so much to our panelists, and stick around for this video and a message following that.
My name is Sas Ambas. My colonial name is Donna Ambers. I moved here back in the land about 2 years ago now, and basically so far we've used it as a place for the youth from the front lines and those displaced to come here for any length of time that they've needed. And this started last spring and all the way up to today. One of the things that we're working on right now is we want to have a youth camp. We also want it youth-led. I feel that's really important because we have so many of our youth that are knowledge keepers as well, and to honor that and to hold them up. And the camp also will be more focused on survival mode, whether it be cooking or learning about the medicines, and we have so much planned for that. Yeah, so we're pretty excited about that. It'll be our first summer camp, and we're looking forward to having the youth here on this territory of ours. This territory that we're living in right now is Hiladi, which means a place to make things right. And I think that's really important with the work that we've done here so far. This is part of the land back movement and matriarch reclamation of the land. And this is a safe place for our two-spirited trans and femmes, as well as people of color. And yes, so this is our goal, is to continue on and do things with our village here. So I'd like to thank everybody that supported us so far, and let's all keep walking together for our youth.
You're muted, Anjali.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. A big thank you to Seth and Buzz for sharing that and giving us a sense of what that could look like and what that partnership is looking like. So that is, just to remind folks, that is in Mamtagila Nation on North Vancouver Island. And so that is what a YCC could look like on a provincial level in a specific community. And I just want to clarify, because I think we had some of this conversation in the chat. It's what the Climate Emergency Unit is advocating for is a national program that would be longer, about 2 years long. But all of these smaller projects give a beautiful sense of what it could actually look like on a smaller scale in community. All right, I just want to make a couple of acknowledgements. I'd like to note that we sent invitations to a few MPs and cabinet ministers to join us today. Although Blake Desjardins is not here today, he was invited. He is the NDP MP from Edmonton, and he is the critic for post-secondary and youth. So his portfolio directly relates to the YCC idea, and he's keen about it as well. Unfortunately, he got called into the House of Commons for a special event, so he couldn't be here. However, NDP MP and critic for the environment and climate change, Laurel Collins, is here. So we want to recognize her, and thank you so much for joining us, Laurel. It's great to have you here, and I hope that you find this galvanizing. I also want to recognize that David Suzuki is here with us today. I can't see you on the call, but thank you so much for being here. And next, speaking of winnability, we are going to hear from another wonderful colleague of mine, Seth Klein, who is the Climate Emergency Unit's team lead. He is the person who wrote the book that started all of this. He wrote A Good War, and if you haven't read it, you should definitely read through it. It's been inspiring thousands of people across the country. It's inspired this whole project. And Seth actually tells a really energizing tale of what a youth climate corps could look like and what it looked like in the wartime in his book. And so no better person to speak to how this campaign is winnable. So I'll throw it over to you, Seth. Take it away.
Thanks, Anjali. Hi, friends. So as you heard, as Naomi mentioned, this is a winnable campaign. It's a campaign that can galvanize and inspire people. Like earlier campaigns, like the student divestment movement, it can provide a focal point for youth and student climate action, and I think leave a legacy of young climate leaders for which we can be grateful for years to come. And once we win a youth climate corps, provided we win a program at the scale needed, it would send an electrifying signal. The establishment of a youth climate corps would communicate to young people and society at large that our government is indeed entering genuine emergency mode. And so, as Anjali just mentioned, a couple of years ago, I wrote this book, A Good War, Mobilizing Canada for the Climate Emergency. And the book tries to map out a mobilization to confront this existential threat of our time. But it is structured around lessons from the Second World War. And one of those lessons is the potentially transformative power of a youth climate corps. In World War II, from a Canadian population at the time of about 11 million people, remarkably, over 1 million enlisted. And more staggering, 64% of them were under the age of 21. They left their farms, they delayed their careers, They deferred their post-secondary studies because they understood the emergency to be in that moment. And so they volunteered to meet the civilizational threat of their generation. And even though in the early days, the training programs to receive them were barely ready, I interviewed one Chinese-Canadian vet for the book, the late George Chow, who recalled training with broom handles in the early days. But no one who enlisted was turned away. And as challenging as that time was, many from that era remember it as one of the most precious of their lives, the time when they found real purpose, fighting for something meaningful in common cause with others. And today, as I give talks and meet young people across the country, I am convinced that tens of thousands of them are once again eager to serve, ready to confront the civilizational threat of this generation. I can feel it every time I present this idea. It resonates. And I tell student audiences that World War II story about these young people who signed up. And then I say, they were you, they were you. But where is your invitation to serve today? Sadly, our country today has yet to issue them such an invitation. These young people want to enlist in the task of our lives, but our government has not yet provided the opportunity. So we are envisioning something big here. There are roughly 10 million people in Canada between the ages of 18 and 35. If only 5% of them were moved to enlist in a program like the YCC, that's 500,000 people, 500,000 people saying, I'm ready to serve, ready to meet the emergency. That's what makes this idea a game changer. So here's how you can help. This is where you all come in. If this idea captivates you, there are many ways that you can help build the call for this new national program, and we're going to summarize them for you on these slides. First, the CEU has created this letter writing tool for folks to send their support for this transformative policy to key federal leaders and their local MP. Now, all federal leaders need to hear from us, but there are a few specific federal leaders that we're focused on, and we're going to show you those in this slide. Here they are. It's a number of federal Liberal cabinet ministers with key portfolios related to this call, as well as a number of NDP MPs whose critic responsibilities relate to this call. And you'll note too that among some of both the Liberals and the NDP there, including Laurel Collins, who's with us on the call, they are members of the Confidence and Supply Agreement Oversight Group. So key to deciding what policies will be part of this agreement between the Liberals and the NDP over the next couple of years. Now, many of you have already used the letter writing tool, but if you haven't, please use the tool to send these folks your message and consider sharing the tool with friends and colleagues, newsletter lists, on social media. And we're going to give you some relevant links now that we're going to drop into the chat. So first of all is the link to the letter writing tool itself, which we're putting in the chat. Second, you're going to see in the chat a link that we've created a welcome package with shareables that you can use to promote the YCC, and you can access it there. And then we're also showing you a link to a Twitter thread about the idea. Second, help us spread the YCC idea far and wide. As Anjali said off the top, we want you to make this your campaign. What does it look like for your organization and its members? Talk to your friends. If you have kids, talk to them about the idea. Maybe they want to see if their student councils or other youth groups want to endorse the idea of the YCC. The National YCC campaign is going to be producing a bunch of videos and shareables and other campaign materials in the coming months to drum up excitement about this idea. And we need your help to amplify these far and wide. We're going to be producing these as unbranded materials so that your organizations can use them as your own. Earlier, we shared you that fabulous new YCC video. And now's the moment some of you have been waiting for in the chat. So one specific request to all of you is, please share the video. Let's make it, trend. So we're putting in the link in the chat now, links to the video on a bunch of platforms, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. So whatever social media you use, there's the video, and share it to your heart's content. And if you are keen to get these shareable items as we produce them, I'd invite you to join our Slack workspace. We're going to share a link in the chat now to a Google form where you can sign up to join the Slack workspace specifically for YCC organizing. So if you think that you want to throw down on this campaign, please join the Slack. And there can be separate channels by province and other interests and so on. Third, consider approaching other organizations and institutions in your life, faith institutions, union locals, school PACs, community organizations, student and youth groups, to see if they would support and amplify the call for a YCC. And we're going to be providing a template for organizations who want to formally endorse the call for a YCC. So something that you can bring to a union, local, or community group to seek their formal support. Fourth, beyond using the letter writing tool, maybe you're ready to seek a meeting with your local MP to discuss the YCC. And if your local representative happens to be a cabinet minister, yay. And in that case, we'd be happy to help you prepare for that meeting. Just get in touch with us. Fifth, help us see this idea in your local media. Consider writing a letter to the editor or an op-ed or calling your local radio show to talk up the value of the YCC and try to draw out a response from local politicians. And finally, we have a fun action in the works. We want to undertake a national action that would see thousands of young people submit their resumes to the government seeking employment in this as of yet non-existent program. So this could be done by fax, but mostly we hope to present these job applications and resumes in the thousands, in person, in public, to key political leaders. So if that idea sounds fun to you and you'd like to help organize this action, we'd like to invite you to register for an organizing meeting that we'll be holding later this month on Tuesday, March 28th, same time slot as this call. And if you think you'd like to help organize the action, we're putting a link in the chat now to register for organizing that meeting, for that organizing meeting. And we'll also email that out to all of you tomorrow. So there you go, folks, some concrete ways to help get involved. This campaign isn't branded, the CEU doesn't own it, any group can make it their own. And as you go into your regional breakout groups, we hope these ideas can seed some further discussion about how this campaign can take shape where you live. But friends, I'll say it again, it is a winnable campaign. Together, we could press for the creation of a program that gives all of us and young people newfound hope. Back to you, Anjali.
Thanks, Seth. That was so galvanizing in such a short little thing. Seth has been holding this vision for a long time, and sometimes that's what it takes for a really big, audacious win, like what we're talking about. Is, we have to stay committed to that vision and believe that it's winnable until the moment that it actually is won. So I want to give us the opportunity to go into these regional breakouts. We won't go for as long as we had intended to, because we do want to end on time, but just 5 minutes in a breakout group will be great to see who's in your region, who's engaged, and who's working on this stuff. And you have the chance to share contact info and stay in touch if you want, or at the very least, meet some good folks. And there's going to be a facilitator in each breakout. So I'm going to let one of my teammates send us into breakout groups.
They're open.
They're open. So I think you just have to click join. Great. We're seeing folks head in. Awesome. Yeah, we're just going to do 5 minutes here, and then we have a special treat for you when you get back. So join those breakout rooms as soon as you can.
Could I be put in the outside of the other provinces, rest of Canada breakout group, please? I was put in BC.
Oh, yes, we can.
I'm not sure how to sign myself.
I don't see you in here, Trace.
I just moved her over, Anjali.
Oh, okay, perfect. Awesome. Laurel, would you like to hang out in the BC room, or do you want to hang out here, the main one, or if you just want to take a beat for 5 minutes? Oh, you're muted.
We have to make her a co-host.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I think I could.
Okay, there we
Sorry
go.
about that.
I'm happy to do whatever works. Happy to go into the BC breakout room or hang out here.
Okay, I'll send you to BC just so you can see who's in there.
Sounds great.
That's awesome. All right, for the folks who are here, can you put in the chat which room you'd like to go into? And I can send you over there, or Emiko and I can send you over there. Okay, Carter is going to Alberta. Awesome, there you go. Matt's going to Manitoba. Oh, that would be rest of Canada. All right. BC, Nancy to BC, Sophie to Ontario, Bryce to BC, Barbara, where would you, okay, BC, yes, I know you. Dorothy, where would you like to be placed? And here, let's see. Dorothy, Susan, and Michelle. Where would you like to be placed? Susan says Ontario, okay. Paul, Paul, I believe that you are already placed, but let me double check for you. Oh, okay. Well, Michelle, we are going to follow up with an email with the sign up link. So you'll definitely get all the relevant links in an email right after this call. And Dorothy, thanks for coming. All right, well, I am going to take the spotlight off. Yeah.
I'm going to share my screen with that slide, but having some technical difficulties with the Slack application, so I will just send it after we're done, and I won't worry about it for right now.
Yeah. All right, who do we have in here? Is this the rest of Canada? Erin?
The folks that are in here probably have not been assigned. So if you guys want to head to a breakout room, just put where you live, the province that you live in the chat, and we can send you there, or you can just hang out here until we close them. I think we're going to close them in a few minutes. So
yeah, feel free to hang out. We can just chat. I will, or let me see here. I will try to unmute you guys, and we can have a discussion here. There you go. I've sent you all ask to unmute buttons. All right, that should have worked for some of you. Well, I'd love to know who's here. Oh, no worries, Kim. Kim says she's driving.
We're unmuted.
I am on the traditional territories of the Cowichan peoples in the Cowichan Valley. And it's finally warming up here. It has been so cold for the last week, and today I went out without a sweater, so very excited about that.
Oh, Laurel's back. All right, folks. Well, we're actually going to pull people back from those meeting rooms. It's really nice to meet all of you. And I think there'll be an opportunity right after this call to all sign up to a workspace together, and we can actually get to know each other better and start organizing together if that's what you want. But yes, also just to reiterate, feel free to reach out at any time. I know that there were a lot of unanswered questions. There's so much to talk about. So feel free to reach out anytime to get those questions answered. And I think we're bringing folks back from the rooms now.
Okay, so should I close the rooms?
I think so, yeah. All right. So I think those breakout rooms are closing now. I think they get a minute. And if you have any outstanding questions, you can still put them in the Q&A box, and we'll at least know what questions are out there and we can get those answered at a future date. Sorry that we didn't have more time with our panel today. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back. We're getting people trailing back from our breakout rooms. Those were just a short little taste of who is in your region, who's interested in doing this work, and who your people are. Should you be interested in doing some organizing around a youth climate corps, either in your province or region or for the full federal program. So hope you got something out of that. And we will be following up in an email right after this call with more ways to stay in touch with each other. And, you know, this is going to take some ongoing imagination to imagine what this could actually look like in your part of the country. And so it'll be really important to stay connected to the people who are going to be working alongside you. So as Seth mentioned a creative action, the resume drop, where folks are going to be submitting fake resumes. If you're interested in participating in that action, please do come to our online organizing meeting on March 28th. And the registration for that will be dropped into the chat. Amiko just dropped it into the chat. And we'll also send that out in the follow-up email. That's going to be a really fun one. Really excited to see how that goes. Laurel, you're getting a sneak peek of that from this call, I guess. All right, and now one last treat for you so that we can end on a bang. A new song, an unreleased song from the Fugitives. This is another world premiere. You got 2 world premieres in one call. The Fugitives' next album will actually be a climate emergency concept album, which is really cool. I love to see the arts and culture sector take the lead on this work. Makes me really excited. And so this song, its temporary name is called Edge of the Sea. The song will be on that album. It's still unmastered, so this is a rough cut, although I think it sounds great as is. And some of the band members are on the call with us. If you are in the band, we'd love to see who you are. So maybe you could put a little hand up in the chat or say hello in the chat. And we are very grateful to you for sharing this song with us and sharing an early sneak peek of this video with us. So everyone, enjoy The Edge of the Sea.
I know it's desperate, but I had to try. It still looks like fall outside. Bells sound in the streets, still no one believes. Our homes are losing ground to the edge of the sea. So many ways to cope, only one way to fight. The end of the world looks so sad in your eyes. Holding on by a thread, I can't believe things are written. Where's my love and all of this? Where's my love and all of this? desperate, but I had to try. Where's my love in all of this? 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 In all of this.
Woo! Wow. I feel so uplifted from that. I hope you all do too. Someone said in the chat, and I love this, this is what it sounds like in the movies when we win. So I hope that this is the sound of our future win. I just want to share one of the lyrics that you all heard. Brendan McLeod of the band wrote the refrain, "Where's my love in all of this?" And it's about how in the midst of all the chaos and the chaotic thinking that accompanies this crisis, we can quickly lose sight of why we want to make the world better. It's our friends and our families now and our friends and families to come. And the idea that we have loved ones out there that we haven't even met yet is an incredibly hopeful one. And I love how the song ends on this incredibly hopeful note. Brendan says, it's why we're determined to make this album upbeat, even though it deals with our own potential extinction. There's a lot of resolve to be found in joy. And though humans have a lot of bad things going for us, we can be pretty amazing at the joy part. So here's to that. Thank you, Brendan, for that. Well, thank you so much, folks, for joining us. We hope this was informative and uplifting and energizing. And you'll get an email from us tomorrow with next steps. Really grateful for your presence. And thank you so much. So glad to have spent this time together. Onward.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.